Welcome into Wednesday's ESPN FC Live. It's been a minute. Mark Donaldson, Luis Miguel Echegaray, and Stevie Nicol. Today on the agenda, on the menu, we'll be looking at CONCACAF, with CONMEBOL, with UEFA, with some transfer dealings as well, potentially in the offing. But I want to start with the United States of America, specifically Mauricio Pochettino. It wasn't, Stevie, a good international break for the Americans. Why?
Well, I think the first answer is I think right now everybody's expecting way too much. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't beat Panama or Canada. I'm just saying that just because you've got Pochettino now as your manager, considering his history and his resume, it all of a sudden isn't just magically with a wand going to change the way that the US play. You know, what we're seeing right now is no different to the disappointments of previous managers. And so for me, I think we have to take a step back and think about what Pochettino's trying to do. Now, some might say in these games you couldn't tell what he's trying to do, but the one thing he is doing that I can see is he's trying players, and he's trying them in different positions, and he's trying to figure things out. Because I don't really think he has a real grasp on the makeup of his players. You know, this is him. He's joined a country and he's probably been given a list of players that he's been told this is the previous squads. You know, this is something that you can start with, and so it's going to take him time to understand what he's got, and it's going to take him time to try and find some other talent from either within MLS or in Europe or wherever it may be. So I think right now, yes, it was poor, but I think right now for Pochettino and for the US, it is about trying to build something. And unfortunately, when you start at the beginning, sometimes it doesn't look pretty.
LME, does it really matter, US results right now? Because as Stevie quite rightly said, he's trying to figure out what he's got. He's trying to figure out the best way of playing with what he's got. There's a lot of noise that surrounds the US men's national team. But if he has them ready in whichever manner he decides that is the best way for him and for his players for June 2026, when they play their first World Cup game, does now really matter?
Results don't matter, but learning from them matters. And that's the issue, I think, because some of the mistakes that the USMNT continue to have, even though it's under Mauricio Pochettino, and Steve is correct in saying that this is very early for, to put any fingers towards Pochettino. He's still realizing what he has at the scope of what he has, and losing in the Nations League twice to Panama and Canada, the result itself doesn't matter, but you have to learn from them. And here's the key issue. Now, we are at 14 and a half months away from the World Cup, and in the Gold Cup, which is the next competitive tournament for the USMNT, there might not be enough players available due to the fact that there's other competitions happening at the same time, the Club World Cup, et cetera, et cetera. So then after that, you have about 4 international windows for Pochettino to really figure out what he wants. And I agree with Stevie that this is about experimenting and for Pochettino to try and figure out what he wants from the USMNT. But my biggest worry, though, here, Mark Donaldson, is that, number one, time is running out. But number two, I think Pochettino's biggest piece of homework is you have to get USMNT and their fan base to understand who they are. There are no superstars in this squad. Pulisic is a very good player. Anthony Robinson is probably one of the best left backs in the Premier League. McKennie has had his moments for Juventus. Timothy Weah, etc. It's a good core of players, but there's no superstars, right? So if you want to do well in the World Cup, if you want to go beyond the group stages, if you want to get even as close as to the semifinals, and even, dare I say, the final, you need to understand who you are as a team. And at this point, the USMNT don't know who they are. And Pochettino has a responsibility of making sure that that happens. I think they need to be the international version of Nottingham Forest this season. Be a collective unit, extremely tough without the ball, try and be direct, all these things. And I think that's going to be the biggest issue. And the problem right now is that there's 14 and a half months left to do it.
Stevie, looking at the FIFA World Rankings, which you can take whichever way you want to look at them, they're 16th in the world. But behind only Argentina and Brazil, Uruguay and Colombia in the whole of the Americas, South America, Central America, and North America. They're basically saying that the US is the 5th best team in all the Americas.
Yeah, yeah. I think all that shows is the system's flawed.
Yes.
That's the only answer you can give to that. The system is absolutely flawed. The way it's figured out, the way it's worked out, how they come to the conclusions they do. Listen, you can look at it any way you want. The fact is that there's absolutely no way that they are that good. And I think, quite frankly, most people involved in football don't look at the rankings with any sort of real. Well, we just don't believe it. We know who the best sides are, and we know who should be and shouldn't be where. And so, yeah, if you want to go and look at rankings, yeah, you're wasting your time. The fact that the US are 16th, never mind the 5th best in the Americas, is complete and utter nonsense. So the system is flawed.
The reason I brought it up, LME, is to kind of see, does it put unnecessary pressure from suits who look at that and go, oh, we must be that team, we're that good, then we should be winning these games. Because when you look at Mauricio Pochettino and the contract that he's on, it's not so much how much he's being paid, around about $5.5 to $6 million a year. It's more, if he leaves before the World Cup, it would be a record compensation clause. So is it more pressure that they're 5th in the Americas and 16th in the world? Or as Stevie said, is this just something that's FIFA do it every month and most people just laugh at it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's everything that both of you have said. It's an absolute flawed system because it's based on points and on the victories regarding of the 365 of the days of the year that, you know, you're accumulating in terms of matches. And it doesn't really matter who your opponent is. If you get victories, you get points. So therefore you climb up the table, all that stuff. It's an absolute flawed system. And to your point, it adds too much pressure, unnecessary pressure on nations, just like the USMNT, to try and do well or whatever. The key factor, I think, here is, as you said, this is the beginning of the Mauricio Pochettino era, meaning that the U.S. Federation did everything in their power to get a legitimate manager, somebody that was sought after by England, has coached in some of the best teams in Europe, you know, some of the best players in the world. So you would expect, right, just like we started, that now that Pochettino's here, he's going to do some things. But it's going to take time, a time that they don't have. And that's the biggest issue for me. Look, here's the situation as well. The fact that they're playing hosts, to me, adds a massive load of pressure, because now that you haven't had to qualify for the World Cup, you have to find every ounce of every single match in order for you to get better. That's why the Nations League was important. The results were not important, but trying to see what you decipher from them were. And now you have 14 and a half months to do so. I think that the other component as well that should be talked about is the fact that if you watch those games, especially the opening one against Panama, that stadium was a quarter empty. I mean, a quarter full. It was, you know, the majority of those seats were taken by the Mexican fan base in that doubleheader. And in 2 out of the 3 matches that USMNT have to play at the World Cup, it's going to be in Los Angeles, which is a very Mexican-friendly area. So I think the other component for the USMNT and the US Federation is to try and energize the fan base, because sooner rather than later, it's going to diminish. There's a lot to do for the Americans, a lot. They know it. It's not a shocking statement to them. It's just that, once again, the issues that we had for the 2018 World Cup when they didn't qualify, again, you know, work for the badge, you know, do everything that you can, be direct. It just keeps, like, the problems keep on resurfacing. And so Pochettino has that to do. It's going to be a massive mountain to climb, I think.
The thing I don't think it helps either is when you have coaches, and certainly recent times, Greg Berhalter, for example, coming out when he took over, talking about how they were going to play, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to have an identity. And then you've got Pochettino before these games talking about winning the World Cup and doing it. I mean, why are you doing that? It makes no sense. What you want to do is win. That should be your answer. When people start asking about what you're going to do, just say, look, we want to figure a way out how we can win. And however that is, I think the majority of American fans, really, do they care how they play if they win? I don't think so. The fact that they're losing and the fact that they're not playing well, when they feel as though they've been told they're going to get something else, that just makes it worse. So I don't understand the coaches. Keep your mouth closed. Do what you've got to do to win a game, And if you win, people will turn up and watch, regardless of how it looks on the field.
Yeah, especially in international competition, Mark Donaldson.
Yeah,
everything that he just said, everything that Stevie just said is absolutely spot on, especially in international competition. Javier Aguirre, the Mexican national team in the third stint, the reason why Mexico are doing better is because literally that's the message that Aguirre is giving to his Mexican fan base and the team itself. I don't care about anything else but to win and work for the Mexican team. And that's what you're seeing right now.
There's no diagrams on a scorecard. Just get me the win and we move on. Now, speaking of moving on, we've got someone like Pochettino kind of at the start of his international experience. Someone that's coming towards the end of his is Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, the former Belgian boss, now in charge of Portugal, Roberto Martinez, is someone that has shared an ESPN FC studio with you, Stevie Nicol. So I want to kind of do a bit of a job swap right now. And I'm going to put you in charge of the Portuguese national team between now and the World Cup. Hey, you've been in charge of many football clubs and many matches in the past. Would you have Cristiano Ronaldo in your starting 11 for Portugal, Stevie, if you were in charge?
No.
Why?
You can't. Well, because he's not the player he was. Now, listen, the one thing I would say is that Portugal are not flush with centre forwards, which I think is making it easier for Martinez to play Ronaldo. But the fact is that, yes, Ronaldo should be in the squad, but he should be in the squad in a role of being the idol of all these players, being the guy showing the way, talking to the players, motivating the players. And yes, if you need a goal with 20 minutes to go, who better to throw on than Ronaldo, who can maybe produce something from nothing? But to expect him to play 90 minutes and be the player that he was is absolutely not going to happen. And I think it affects everybody around him on the field of play. So, yeah, I wouldn't start him. I'd have him in the squad. I'd have him on the bench. And I'd use him when I really needed something. But other than that, no, absolutely not.
Well, I mean, the fact that he keeps starting, and he scored a couple of goals, missed a penalty in midweek against Denmark. He's still giving some sort of output. Who's got the power in that squad? Is it Cristiano Ronaldo, or is it Roberto Martinez, or is it someone above that?
Cristiano Ronaldo. What happens with Cristiano Ronaldo in the national team is up to Cristiano Ronaldo. The 5-time Ballon d'Or winner, the all-time scorer in international football, causes such an impact within that team that it's his decision to make. So, whether he takes part in it and starts or whatever, it's going to be a conversation, obviously, between Martinez and Ronaldo, but ultimately it's going to be up to Ronaldo. And the problem is that, this is a system, take away Ronaldo for a second. The Roberto Martinez system almost encourages attacking fluidity. You've seen it all the way at the back from his Wigan days to whatever. And when you look at this lineup right now on the screen, and you look at the players like Rafa Leao, Conceição, Trincao, who was on the bench, as well as Gonzalo Ramos, they have a lot of players that like to be fluid in their attack. When you put Cristiano Ronaldo in this first 11, just like Stevie said, this version of Cristiano Ronaldo, right, the 40-year-old, he demands so much attention because he's a target man that all that fluidity goes out the window. Now, they beat Denmark quite convincingly in the second leg, but that first leg, MD, was one of the worst performances I've ever seen by Portugal in recent years. And part of it is because of this static nature. So I agree with Stevie. Ronaldo's obviously going to be a part of this squad, but he shouldn't start. He should be an impact player, somebody that comes in maybe with 20 minutes to go when the opponent's tired, and then you bring on somebody like Ronaldo to add a little bit of fear. But at this point, it's only down to one man, that decision, and that's Ronaldo himself.
So, yeah, you've both said that you would both have him on the bench. He still has something to make an impact. But, Elimi, you've also said that it's Cristiano Ronaldo that decides if he wants to play. That can't be healthy, Stevie, going forward, because he isn't what he was. He still has something to offer. But if that's the case, if the player has the power here going forward into a World Cup, what are the other options for Roberto Martinez if, as LME says, he's got a player that decides if I'm fit, I'm starting, then that's good enough for me? Are they frightened of what he says if they drop him?
Well, the problem is that Martinez's past history with the big time guys at Belgium suggests that he lets them decide, which is why I agree with LME that it seems as though it's going to be down to the player, which is completely and utterly wrong. I understand when somebody is coming to the end of their career and it's international football and the manager has a word and says, "How do you feel? You know, are you feeling good? You know, do you have any little niggles? How are you?" I understand that, but when you're talking about a guy who's 40, a guy who can't run away from anybody, a guy who demands the ball when he shouldn't be, a guy who's going to influence the whole rest of the team and affect that fluidity that you've been talking about, it's 100% wrong. But I just don't see Martinez being the guy to stand up to Ronaldo. I just don't see it.
There's elements of hanging on to the past. With Portugal, there was certainly a glimpse of the future with Argentina. No Lionel Messi, but a 4-1 win over Brazil. Even Giuliano Simeone coming off the bench and scoring his first international goal. Is international football, LME, more about the sum of the parts rather than the superstar individuals? Is that the way it's going?
Well, I mean, listen, when you focus specifically on Argentina, absolutely. I mean, I've said it for a while now. Ever since Lionel Scaloni led Argentina and Messi, of course, to win the World Cup in 2022. This is one of the, if not the most complete team in international football. And they've shown it for a while, with or without Lionel Messi. At Copa America, Lionel Messi wasn't even the best player, and he was also injured as well in that final. During World Cup qualifiers, overall, throughout the trajectory of this cycle, they've been outstanding because they are such a collective unit. They are like a football version of a college fraternity. They're all just like brothers fighting for each other. And they played Jogo Bonito against Brazil last night and embarrassed them. Dibu Martinez was like, juggling during the game at some point. Whether you agree with it or not, my point remains. This is such a confident together team, and it's all because of Scaloni. And to answer your question, now that they've earned a place in the World Cup for next year, becoming the first South American nation to do so, Lionel Scaloni can now strengthen this roster. He now has, Thiago Almada and Julian Alvarez and Paredes and all these players now just getting better and better and better. And guess what? They have the cherry in the top. If Messi is healthy and fit, he becomes part of this team as well. Alongside Spain, I have them as my favorites to win the World Cup next year at this moment. I think they're that good.
That's very timely, because that's the next question.
Yeah.
The reason it's timely, this surprised me, Stevie. Argentina are the 6th favourites with the bookmakers to win the World Cup next year. They're behind France, they're behind England, they're behind Brazil, who they're well ahead of in the World Cup qualifying. They're behind Spain, and they're behind Germany. 10-1 seems rather generous, does it not?
Right, I'm off. I'm going to the bookies to put money on.
I've just brought this. I couldn't believe that. That's crazy. Do they not watch games?
It's just European bias, man. It's ridiculous.
It is.
Well, the algorithm's off, isn't it? I mean, because that's what the bookies do. They don't sit here and talk about how great Argentina are and they're a team and, well, we'll make them favourites. It's all algorithms, and that's how they do it. But there's no way that's possible. If somebody said to me, who's the last team Scotland wants to play tomorrow? I would say Argentina. That's what I would say.
I'd say a lot more. A lot of times.
I'm sure it's a long list.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Argentina are just, Argentina are the perfect example of a talented bunch of players who are a team. And Brazil are a classic example of a talented bunch of players who are not a team. I mean, it's such a stark contrast, and it played out last night just perfectly, and it really showed what these two sides are. And unfortunately, for most teams, most international sides, it's tough to get that team unit together. Regardless of what talent you've got, to get a team unit together for an international team is really difficult. But I tell you what, Scaloni, how he has got that talent and all those egos and moulded it to the point where we can all see it's all about the guy next to them. It's not about them, it's about the guy next to them. It's about the team. I'm sacrificing myself regardless for the team. And they're just so strong, they're so deep, they're so good. How can they not be favourites?
Crazy. Well, 10-1 if you fancy it. You know where to go. Just before we end the international scene and talking about it, before we move on to the transfer speculation, including Trent Alexander-Arnold, we'll get to that in just a second. Just a quick word about the UEFA Nations League semi-finals. We've got Germany against Portugal, Spain against France. I mean, it's a blockbuster last four, LME. Who impressed you most getting to the semi-finals?
Well, Spain. Even though they conceded a few goals here, I think some of the elements that Stevie was talking about, Argentina, kind of reflect on Spain. If you look at this lineup right now from the Spanish side, there is so much swagger here. And I'm not just talking about Lamine Yamal's Instagram reply to Van der Vaart. There's so much going on here. It's not your grandmother's Spain anymore. This is a very confident Spain, a young Spain, a vibrant Spain that if you score 2 against them, they'll score 3. And Luis de la Fuente has done a really good job at making sure that all of this works out. We saw it, of course, in the Euros last summer, and I think it's just going to be a continuation. Lamine Yamal continues to get better, but it's not just about him. This is a really good Spain. So I'm very, I was impressed with them, which, by the way, made me very impressed with the Netherlands by default, because the Netherlands had many injuries, and Koeman, a very stubborn Koeman, had to adjust and everything. So I was impressed with them. So for them, France, I never worry about France because they're so insanely talented that they could be horrible until literally the last day before they have to play the World Cup, and they'll have a good World Cup. Portugal, we've talked about, and the only issue I have with Germany, there's a few, but I like what Nagelsmann does, high press, fluid style. But when it doesn't work, they really are vulnerable, and they don't have a very strong defensive midfield unit, and that's going to cost them an international competition. So I would say Spain, they continue to elevate.
Yeah, Germany were both Jekyll and Hyde, 3-0 up, having won the first 2-1 away to Italy, and then they go and concede 3 and maybe hanging on a little bit at the end. So the Nations League semi-finals will certainly be good. World Cup qualifying up and running as well. But our attention is going to turn to transfer speculation. And in the last 48 hours or so, it seems, although it's not been confirmed, there's a little more meat to the bone now that Trent Alexander-Arnold will be playing his football in Spain with Real Madrid next season alongside Jude Bellingham. To talk about a Liverpool fullback now, let's speak to a former Liverpool fullback of the past. Stevie Nicol, is this something that was always in your mind going to be a case of when rather than if, or did you hold out hope that maybe, just maybe, Trent would sign a new deal to stay at Anfield?
I mean, let's be honest, it was the worst kept secret that he was going to Real Madrid. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to fall off their chair when they hear this. It was always bang on. And I never really felt at any stage that Trent was going to stay. And I'm not surprised he's going to Real Madrid. I mean, I think Real Madrid's the perfect place for him, quite frankly. Real Madrid's a team that wants to go forward. They want to create. They want to score goals, and this guy fits all the criteria. Yes, he has issues defensively, but Ancelotti, or if it's Alonso, will do what Klopp did and do what Slot did, and figure a way of covering those deficiencies, because what he's going to give Real Madrid going forward is just going to be, well, I'll be surprised if it's anything less than sensational, because that's what he is with the ball at his feet going forward. He can pick a pass, he can score a goal. I mean, his free kicks are dynamite. I mean, it's going to be great at Real Madrid. We'll all be fighting to see who can take the free kick. But I mean, it's not a surprise. I think it's the perfect move. Listen, let's put it this way. If Trent Alexander was going to go to Wolves or somebody like that, then it would be a complete and utter disaster, right?
And a shock.
And a surprise as well, yeah. And the money wouldn't be as good. But the fact is, Real Madrid, a team that are going to dominate the majority of games they play in, they're going to have possession. it just makes complete sense for the talents that Trent Alexander-Arnold has.
I just wonder who's doing the tracking back when Trent gets forward, given the start to the season that Real Madrid had. By the way, for Liverpool, is Conor Bradley the ready-made replacement, or do you think they need to go out and kind of add in that and strengthen that area if he goes?
No, I think Conor Bradley's done enough in the last couple of seasons that he deserves to be given that spot. And then it's up to him to show his consistency. I mean, he pretty much has done in the games he's played. The one thing I would say is that Conor Bradley's missed quite a lot of games in the last couple of years. Now, I don't know whether that's just the adjustment to playing more at the highest level. But that would be my only concern. In terms of talent, absolutely, I think he can take Trent's place.
LME, let's move not far away from Liverpool to Manchester. And the Manchester Evening News, along with ESPN FC, reporting that between 10 and 12 players could potentially leave Manchester United in the summer. You're talking Rashford and Casemiro. You're talking Evans and Heaton retiring, Eriksen, Lindelof, Anthony, who's now with Betis, Jadon Sancho, that Chelsea thing, Bayindir, Malacia, Shaw, and Zirkzee. It's much needed, but for those that aren't out of contract in the summer, how difficult could it be for Manchester United to move on the players that they want to, but maybe can't because they still have contracts to run?
Yeah, contracts that are very high in wages. And I think that's the difficulty as well. I think that's going to be the trouble there because it's not going to be a Ruben Amorim problem. It's just a problem with the board for giving this much of a contract to so many players. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. I mean, personally, as an Aston Villa fan, I would love Marcus Rashford to stay with us permanently just because of what he's doing. But that contract is absolutely ridiculous. So, it's going to be intriguing. Look, as soon as Ruben Amorim came to Manchester United, it was very clear here that a revolution was going to happen, whether it was in progressively from, January transfer window or in this summer. And this is what you're seeing. So I'm not surprised. The issue, as you mentioned, is going to be the finances and making sure that all these players that are on ridiculous wages go somewhere else, and also in a timely manner, because, it's going to be tricky to do all of this with also in the environment of sustainability rules as well, and making sure that United, bring in as much as they, take out, or the other way around. So it's going to be tricky for them. But all those names that you mentioned, I'm not surprised. In fact, I'm actually kind of shocked it's only 10 or 11 or 12 players, because I know that Amorim wants a complete revolution in the summer. It's going to be a very interesting window summer for Manchester United, not to mention that they're also coming here for the Premier League Summer Series. So there's a lot to do there. But yep, the Amorim revolution is coming. Whether it happens completely, just like of all these wish list people, we'll have to find out.
Stevie, as someone who's been in charge of football clubs and maybe had to do some moving on and bringing in, what's the kind of time frame that Manchester United are looking at here and Ruben Amorim is looking at to get what he wants? Because it ain't no quick fix, is it?
My goodness. Do you know, I couldn't answer that off the top of my head because, unfortunately for United, they find themselves in a position where it's out of their hands. They need to sell players. And if nobody wants the players, then they can't do anything. I mean, it really is that bad for them. It's not a case of, look, here you go, there's a little, not the biggest pot of gold I can give you, but there's a little pot of gold. Go and get some players to make us better, and I'll try and move the rest of these guys on. That's not the case. It's you have to move players first. And let's be honest, there are not many Manchester United players that they want to move on that other people are desperate to get, particularly at the wages they're on. And so they're on a hiding to nothing. It's a great idea getting rid of 10 players. Yeah. Who's taking them? And what are you going to do when you can't get rid of them? You're snookered. I mean, but I can't see any way, regardless of what Rashford does between now and the end of the season, that Aston Villa are going to turn around and take up that contract and pay money for them. I mean,
they can't afford it.
But particularly after they tried to do that with Coutinho when they signed him.
Yeah. And
it was a complete and utter bust. So I think they'll be a little worried about that, and they'll be thinking about that. But they're not taking that contract on. And so not only are you trying to get rid, you're actually getting some back. Because Jadon Sancho, if Chelsea send them back, they actually have to pay them $5 million, which is mental. But oh my goodness, how many windows? When you need a whole squad, I mean, take a guess, 6 windows.
You might actually need a window, not to bring players in, but to use money to pay players off. To get them to leave.
It's just such a mess they've got themselves in.
Well, they'll have to find a way out of that. I want to end with one player in particular, and I was doing a little bit of digging, Alexander-Isak of Newcastle. 6-year deal that he signed in 2022 for 63 million. I've had one or two of kind of gone back and forward with Arsenal fans for stuff that we've said on here. Of course, Arsenal's a step up from Newcastle. Well, that's arguable. That's debatable. For Alexander-Isak, what's his value and who can afford him? But LME, where's a step up from Newcastle that he would be interested in going to? Because while Arsenal might be a step up, according to Arsenal fans, it's probably more of a sidestep and just a little bit up. Is he looking at a Barcelona or a Real Madrid now and pretty much that's it? Or is he looking for a Manchester City? What do you think Alexander-Isak's next move might be if he decides at Newcastle, okay, I've done my bit here, I want to move on?
Yeah, I mean, it's also all dependent whether Newcastle, aside from obviously winning the Carabao Cup, are getting a Champions League spot and keeping them happy, because I'm imagining, especially in a year where, precedes the World Cup, Isak wants to be playing the very best possible in the best possible competitions. So a lot depends if Newcastle get that 4th or 5th spot, aside from the Carabao Cup, even though they're playing in Europe anyway. So Isak is, in my opinion, at this moment, top 3, best strikers in Europe right now. He is unbelievable. And I think that his value right now, I wouldn't be surprised if you're looking at numbers between 120 and 150 million. There's reports of Barcelona being interested, but I have no, we're talking about Manchester United and finances. I have no idea how Barcelona are going to afford that one. But I think that's the scope of where he's aiming at. Arsenal may very well be a step up if they indeed have Champions League football next season, which is obviously what they're going to do. But it's also about a player's happiness. What does he want? How does he feel within a club and how he's represented? And everything that Isak has said is he's very happy at Newcastle and he loves to play there. But I do think that Champions League football will be a big factor here. And also the value, because there is no way in the world that Isak is going to leave for anything less than 100 or 120 million. He's one of the best strikers in Europe right now.
Stevie, last question to you about Alexander Isak. We've spoken a lot about Arsenal and signing a striker. Is it now the case that Arsenal, when they sign a striker, have to sign a statement striker, make a statement of intent? And would Alexander-Isak, if Arsenal met what Newcastle were looking for a transfer fee and met what Alexander-Isak was looking for in personal terms, is that something that might be an option? Or, as I said to LME, is it a Real Madrid or a Barcelona? Is it top level now that he's looking at?
Yeah, there's not a team on the planet that Isak wouldn't play at. I mean, there's just not. He's that good. He's absolutely one of the best in Europe. And if you have any ambition, or certainly if you have the highest ambitions to win Champions League, then if he's available, then you have to sign him, and it's going to be the going rate. As far as Arsenal's concerned, absolutely it would make a difference. The amount of games that they've drawn or ended up losing because they're short of 20 goals from the centre forward. I mean that is the difference that somebody like Isak would make. He would absolutely put Arsenal up there as favourites to win the Premier League next season if they signed him during the summer. I don't think there's any argument with that. But what will Arsenal do? Again, I don't think Isak's going anywhere. I don't think Newcastle will be selling him. And there's very few strikers around. Maybe they can get the likes of an Osimhen, but I'm not so sure. So, yes, they need a statement striker. I definitely agree with that. Is it going to happen? It's not very likely. I don't see it.
Balls in Newcastle score. They've got a player who's at the top of his game, one of the best in the world, and still has more than 3 years left on his contract. My thanks to LME. My thanks to Stevie Nicol. We'll be here again on Friday for the next ESPN FC Live. Bye for now.